The agency evolved in 1978 when women started calling shelters in San Francisco seeking emergency shelter. Women in San Francisco recognized that the number of calls from the East Bay were growing, and there was a need for domestic violence services in the East Bay.
My name's Liz Hendrickson, and I was part of the committee that put together ASafePlace, and now I'm on the bench. I'm a Superior Court Commissioner. I came to ASafePlace. I came to the group that founded it because I was working my way through law school. A group of us started meeting and talking about how we could offer services to women here in the Oakland-Berkeley area. Victim witness, for instance, had access to hotel, motel vouchers. So if a woman called the police and could get referred, she could be put up in a motel room. So we arranged to get a phone line installed in a local church, and we went and answered the phone there because, of course, we didn't have cell phones. Now, people don't really realize that in our lifetimes, how much things have changed. The legal system wasn't really on board with domestic violence yet. The police didn't arrest, the district attorney didn't prosecute. So you could have a woman with broken bones in the hospital, and you'd be arguing with law enforcement, including the district attorney, about whether they were going to bring a case. So we had to have an agenda that actually addressed those kind of system shortcomings. At the same time, we were trying to help individual women. One of the signatories to our incorporation paperwork was Eva Patterson, who's gone on to have an illustrious career as a civil rights attorney, nationwide really. But at that time, she was one of the women attorneys in Alameda County Legal Aid. And so she brought the first lawsuit in the country against police for what was called, in those days, an arrest avoidance policy. And that was very common nationwide. And Oakland police had a written policy that said, if you're called to a domestic violence call, do everything you can to avoid arresting the perpetrator. So that's why it was called arrest avoidance policy. And that lawsuit, Scott v. Hart, was a federal suit. And Eva was one of the main lawyers who brought it. And that was settled in the early 80s, and that policy was abolished. So now I carry this phone around because now part of the law is that if a police officer is at a domestic violence call, he calls a judge for a restraining order. 24/7, police officer has access to a judicial officer so that we can order that the perpetrator move out, stay away, and it's good immediately.
There were 3 other domestic violence agencies at the time in Alameda County, and I reached out to them, and together we formed the Alameda County Battered Women's Shelter Network. And there was also a statewide coalition, which was the California Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And we also were a member of that organization, again, as a way to have a presence at the state level and to trying to get dedicated funds beyond the marriage license fees to support our work.
I came to California to get away from a domestic violence situation with the very violent person that would stalk me. The person that abused me sabotaged my reproductive life, and so I always felt really connected to the children at the shelter. One situation that really meant a lot to me was that a woman who had killed her batterer, we got a phone call from her public defender, and she said, this woman is pregnant and she's at Santa Rita. She was so She was so traumatized. And she immediately told me the story of shooting him with his own gun that she found in the closet. So we brought her to the shelter, and I think she stayed probably at least 3 months, although our time was supposed to be, I believe, 8 weeks at the time, 6 to 8 weeks at that time. She was just a remarkable person, and that's just one of the people that we dealt with. My experiences watching children come through the doors of a safe place really formed a core belief and passion in me to address the needs of children and the needs of parents who are struggling to provide safety for their children.
I think when A Safe Place started, we were one of 4 safe places in the entire country where a woman could find shelter and safety. So as we started to explore the needs of clients and victims, we recognized that many women did not come to shelters. We started a partnership with the Oakland Police Department where we created a domestic violence unit under Chief Samuels. And that created the first partnership to create the law enforcement work, not only law enforcement, but with the criminal justice system, with the district attorney's office, with the victim witness departments, with all of these agencies that battered women would come into contact with. And most often these agencies are first responders. We help to create the protocols and some of the procedures that hospitals use today in screening for domestic violence. Normally when you go into a hospital, you are now asked whether or not you are safe.
We offer victims and their children support services in 2 facets. One, our 24-hour crisis hotline that provides emergency shelter services to survivors of domestic violence and their children. We also have a children's program for the children that are participating in the shelter services. Also, we have our community counseling center, which is in a different location, but we provide outpatient services, if you will. We provide a homework group for kids who are of school age that are residing in the shelter. We also have art therapy sessions that take place in the evening, and these programming services go on as the moms are participating in individual therapy sessions or support group sessions to keep the children occupied.
We recognize that domestic violence among teens is prevalent. We have teenagers in high schools. 1 in 3 teens are abused by the time they're reaching the 12th grade. If we can provide some level of intervention in high schools, we can have a different generation of violence-free teens.
I look toward us with our ambassador program, putting in an ambassador program that's by the youth, for the youth, and with the ultimate goal of establishing a teen crisis hotline where teens will have a resource they can call and they can talk and they can share the experiences of what they're going through. We like to make sure our shelter is representative of the community that we serve. We outreach to the Latina community, the Southeast Asian community, just to name a few, so that we are culturally diverse and we let our community at large know that we're open to everyone.
Providing services to clients, especially the Latino community, makes me feel really good because I know a lot of people struggle with, finding services in their own language. And to me, that's an accomplishment that we can offer those services in Spanish.
I have been the shelter advocate for A Safe Place for about 3 years now, but I've been with the organization on and off for 10 years. I always get, you're a man doing this work. What motivates you and what is your passion? Why are you doing this work? The reason why I do this work is because a lot of people in my community experience domestic violence, and for many years it's been taboo and nobody wants to address it. In the face of domestic violence has always been a woman. And I felt that it was important for a man to become an ally and link up with other service providers to provide services for survivors of domestic violence.
Volunteers are critically important. The agency is based on the work of volunteers. We now have a formal volunteer program where volunteers serve on the crisis line. They work throughout the shelter on various aspects of the program.
The state of California mandates a 40-hour domestic violence training session for anyone who is going to work as an advocate or a case manager in our domestic violence program, or those who are going to volunteer. So we make those classes available. We conduct those classes. Our training curriculum covers the history of domestic violence. It covers cultural competency. It covers the cultural responsiveness. It also covers teen dating violence awareness and prevention, the batterer's intervention piece of domestic violence, as well as trauma and the impact of trauma on children of domestic violence.
I'm the weekend crisis line advocate, and that involves responding to calls that come in through the crisis line, emergency calls. It could be where someone, the domestic violence crisis is going on right then, and that means responding to finding out what's going on, comforting the caller, providing service for them. It may have to redirect the call. One thing about a safe place is we specifically provide services for those that are in immediate harm, and then we advocate for them to get away from that harm, to be in a safe place. Pretty much, I listen. I give them an opportunity to kind of just unload a little bit, because that's what some are looking for, an ear. Someone to listen, to be empathetic. And once the conversation has gone on for a while, I will mention the services that we provide, such as the counseling, free counseling.
My day job is as a deputy sheriff with Alameda County Sheriff's Department. I think the relevance between my day job and volunteering is perspective. When I work for the Sheriff's Department, you get the perspective of the person who's arrested for domestic violence. But working as a volunteer, you get the other side. You get the perspective of the victim.
30 years ago, I became a volunteer for a safe place. I met some people who had been victims of domestic violence. I realized that everybody doesn't have the same response to domestic violence. And I have experienced domestic violence myself, but what I knew and what I experienced and what I did was not taught to me. It was sort of a natural reaction, and it goes back to my marriage. My husband hit me, and I divorced him the next day. And I have never, ever been mistreated again since then. The volunteers were trained to interact with clients at the shelter, to interact with clients and their children, to provide services for the clients in terms of helping them find housing, find jobs, find childcare, and move toward a goal of self-sufficiency. Helping the women to understand that self-esteem is the most important thing that will help them not continue to go back and be abused.
A safe place provides comprehensive level of services to break the cycle of violence. And part of that comprehensive level of services is a working board of directors. We help run the organization. We provide the oversight for the budgeting, the strategic plan. These are not the sexy issues, but these would help give us the rich kind of level of service. We work directly with the executive director, Carolyn Russell. I'm the vice chair and part of, if you will, the executive committee that helps look at our various needs. Besides funding, but also the community outreach, the level of program, long-term, short-term. We like to think that we're part of not just breaking the cycle, but also of helping to prevent and violence by the level of outreach that we help provide.
We did some what I think were important things for the organization. I was there in the days that we moved from the Oakland Army base into the administrative offices in Oakland, which was a wonderful move. We reviewed and rewrote the bylaws, and we established a financial plan and a fiscal plan that I think put the organization on much firmer financial footings and created programs for endowments and for staff benefits and retirement plans that did not exist before. I was on the advisory board for a couple of years after my 5 years on the board. I think I received a lot more than I gave. My eyes were open to domestic violence, but mostly my eyes were open to the spirit of volunteerism that I saw, because the people that I saw, mostly women again, they had families, they had jobs, they had hobbies, they had other interests, and they still gave so much time to a safe place. And it's just impressed me, and I still talk about it to my friends.
I first got involved with the Safe Place because I'm program director at a community mental health center, and one of our clients was admitting to us that she was involved in some domestic violence. This was a mother and her 2 children. She had made the leap to leave her abusive relationship, and working with them collaboratively with a Safe Place, this was a huge turning point in the life of this person. And what I was so impressed with was a Safe Place was not only giving this woman and her children shelter, but was giving her a sense of dignity back, was supporting her very gently yet firmly to continue on towards a path of freedom and healing. So this was more than just a place that they were giving her. It was more than just a safe residence. It was this whole kind of circle of caring and helping her to make this transition. So we're very excited because we just signed a memorandum of understanding with a Safe Place. It's kind of a first in the Bay Area for a domestic violence agency and a community mental health center to work together, intentionally work together to bridge a gap in services. Safe Place will have access to our clinicians, so if they have people call who need counseling, we will be able to respond and add to the counseling that a Safe Place already offers. That our people who have some specialties in different areas of trauma-informed work can come over and do groups or individual counseling with the Safe Place clients.
Carolyn Russell initiated a meeting with some women in ministry in the Bay Area and to introduce them to the faith-based initiative, and also to encourage them. So many of them attended the subsequent training. And so it's an opportunity for many women who have themselves been victims or suffered abuse to also help others and to learn effective ways of doing it.
The Faith-Based Project is one of the initiatives that we've partnered with. And Blue Shield of California supported a Safe Place with a grant to educate Oakland ministers around domestic violence. We recognize that people turn to their faith when they're in crisis, no matter what race or culture that they may be. So we feel that faith leaders are most often placed in counseling positions. They most often are first responders, and they most often are used in courts to be witnesses for perpetrators.
When I worked with a Safe Place, I think I started in 1979, 1980, maybe even earlier than that. And I started as working as a volunteer, doing counseling. And then once I got my license, I started working in the shelter, and I ran groups at ASafePlace, and I did individual counseling for the women that were housed in the ASafePlace. It's therapy. Working with women I wanted to work with women around trauma. And that was always my desire, to work in the field of trauma and to work with women around empowerment and domestic violence and sexual assault. When you're empowering women, you're empowering whole families. And when you empower families, you're empowering community.
ASafePlace has been unique in terms of its services. I think we have been one of the few battered women's shelters nationally that have provided services to male children over the age of 12. Our philosophy has always been to keep the family together. We recognize that men cannot change without the skill to change. We recognize that partnerships with institutions serving men is critically important to the work that we do in victim advocacy.
I'm looking forward to taking a part in the re-entry program, where we are working with the prison population, those who are being released from the prison population and are at risk to returning to a domestic violence situation. We are outreaching to them and doing case management with them so that they will have an alternative place to come to.
The women that come to the ASafePlace now come from all across the globe that have settled here and are experiencing the same thing: domestic violence, some antiquated, patriarchal, xenophobic, homophobic kinds of ideologies that are no longer, that are maladaptive behaviors for the 21st century, but women are victimized by. And the ASafePlace is addressing all of those issues. So I just think it's an organization that is moving into the 21st century.
As current board chair, I'm reaching out to say that we need people to continue to struggle. It's not over. We still face battering at a high percentage annually, not only in Oakland, but the Bay Area and the world. We need our day of coming together in community to make that difference across all cultures, across all lines, all class, everything, because we're all in it together. And we believe in ASafePlace that the best way to do this is come together in community to make that difference, to stand up and voice bullying, to stand up and fight against racism, sexism, and all of the isms that continue to try to divide us.